Back November 2025, Google dropped a bomb that cost me over $250,000 personally. They banned thousands of Google Workspace mailboxes overnight, mine included and tons of my clients. And I'm talking about the legacy panels that have been running perfectly for years. Gone, poof. The entire cold email community was in panic mode. People were saying cold email is dead. And I was in group chats with all of the biggest names in the industry, Zapmail, Instantly, all the major info players. Everybody was scrambling, but Google wasn't done. A few weeks after the bans, they followed up with a massive change to their spam filter algorithms. Campaigns that we had running and inboxing at 100% for over 2 years suddenly dropped below 50% overnight. This is my own campaigns included, and it wasn't just me. Every single person I knew doing cold email was dealing with this, and I had thousands of clients relying on me for mailbox infrastructure, and all of a sudden they were getting 0% inbox to Google. Now, over the past 3 months, we've been working around the clock to fix these issues and to future-proof ourselves so this doesn't happen again. And if you've been around the cold email block like I have, you've probably seen this pattern repeat itself. Microsoft makes a change, Google makes a change, and the whole cold email world goes into panic, and then we figure it out. And that's what this video is about. We figured it out. We at least know what to do for the time being until the next panic. So I want to recoup what happened over the past 3 months, what collectively all of the top names in cold email have been doing to test, experiment, and figure it out, and what those solutions are so we can bring them to you, and you can get back to sending 100% inbox to Google mailboxes. Now, if you remember in 2024, this was Microsoft. Nobody could figure out how to inbox to Microsoft. And now we're inboxing 100% to Microsoft. So it's a constant push and pull. They make a change, we figure it out, they lower the guard gates and make it easier for us to get through, and then things go back to normal. Now things are back to normal. But if you don't keep up with the experiments, with what to do next, then you're probably still sending cold emails like it's 2022 and you haven't hit the inbox since. Because remember, when stuff like this happens, we have to look at our systems and sometimes we have to rebuild. Sometimes that means killing old domains, starting new ones, killing old mailboxes, worming new ones. And that's why diversification is so important, because you protect yourself going forward, which is exactly what we've been doing over the past 3 months. And we even redesigned our entire mailbox infrastructure service. So now if you go to leadgenj.com/inbox or inbox.leadgenj, you'll see our new Inbox Insiders, which is completely different than before this happened. So now, after months of testing with the top cold email experts in the world, I have answers for you on what actually works in 2026 to inbox to Google. Let's break it down. So first, let's start with the non-negotiables, the basics. These still haven't changed very much, but people still screw them up constantly. So I have to reiterate, because if you mess up the basics, the fundamentals, the stuff I've been teaching since 2024, you have no chance of hitting the inbox and nothing else I say will matter. So let's start with your DNS records. These need to be perfect, and they're more important than ever. Not good, they need to be perfect. You need to have an SPF record, a DKIM record, and a DMARC record, all configured correctly. Either learn how to do this yourself or use a service like the Inbox Insiders that will do it all perfectly for you. Now, there is one big change when it comes to setting up your DNS records, and that is we are no longer using tracking domains. This is a CNAME record that points to a specific IP address. I think one of the big problems that these cold email providers are cracking down on is everybody's got a CNAME record pointing to Instantly, which is like a red flag you're waving saying, hey, I'm sending cold emails. So from now on, we are not using custom tracking domains. Now, if you watched my 4-hour masterclass from 2024, you'd say, Jay, this is different. Why are you contradicting yourself? Well, things change. Back in 2024, we were still tracking clicks, we were still tracking opens. Now we're not doing that anymore. So there's no real reason to have a custom tracking domain anymore. Now you need to start thinking about every email you send as what fingerprints am I leaving with this email? Well, Google, Microsoft are looking at these emails and they're looking for fingerprints. A CNAME record pointing to Instantly is a fingerprint. An OAuth configuration is a fingerprint. Any tracking domain or code that you have is a fingerprint that they can use to say that guy is sending cold emails. And when everyone's got the same CNAME records pointing to Instantly or Smart Lead, it's a dead giveaway. So now any mailbox or domain that you order from us is not going to have that custom tracking domain, and I recommend whatever provider that you're using, you tell them to remove it or go remove it yourself. Now, for those of you saying, Jay, I need a tracking domain, Well, it's still better to use a custom one pointing to Instantly than to use Instantly's default tracking domain. So if for some reason you need to track open rates or you need to track link clicks, then it's still better to set up your own and just point it to Instantly. But if you can, please, you want to give yourself every shot that you can of hitting the inbox, then don't use them and don't track anything. Tracking domains are only used for tracking open rates and link clicks. And if you turn all those things off and you're not using unsubscribe links, which we're not going to be doing, now you're only sending plain text, which is what you want to do. Only send plain text for those first emails. No HTML, no tracking codes, nothing. That also means no unsubscribe links. Now, you might be saying, Jay, Google and Microsoft, they explicitly tell you that if you want to hit the inbox, you need to have unsubscribe links. Why would you ignore these? And I'm telling you, yes, ignore Google and Microsoft. Remember, their goal is to create the best experience for their users, not to help cold emailers land in the inbox. Unsubscribe links, even though they say that it's required, is actually going to hurt your deliverability. For that reason, we do not use them. However, if somebody does want to unsubscribe, they want off of the list, and they tell you to stop and you keep emailing them, now you're putting yourself in trouble and you should not do that. So one thing you should be doing instead inside of your Instantly is setting up, let's go to settings, let's go to block list, and you can set up these AI block list triggers. So when somebody says one of these words, it actually automatically unsubscribes them and moves them to a block list. That way you don't even have to think about it. Settings, block list, AI block list triggers, it's just looking for words like stop, bad fit, unsubscribe. That way you don't have to do it manually every time. Now the other fingerprint that we're dealing with is OAuth codes. So when you connect your Google account to a platform like Instantly, you're typically doing it through a method called OAuth. And everybody using the same platform typically has the same OAuth code. And this could be a way that Google identifies and flags cold emailers in the future. Now, good news for us is OAuth is also the same way I connect like my Gmail to my N8N. So it doesn't really say that this guy is sending cold email, but it's definitely a sign. Now, right now, there's no good way around that, unfortunately. Especially with Instantly and Smartly, they don't really have a way around it because everybody's pointing their OAuth to the same platform. However, I think that's why we're seeing tools like Email Bison, which is invite only. You can't just go sign up. I'm sorry, if you're a high ticket client, that's what we're using for you. For everybody else, Instantly is still the best option. But what Email Bison does that's unique, instead of logging in at instantly.ai, I'm actually logging into my Email Bison at a server that they set up for me, send.leadgenj.com. Why this is so powerful is because now instead of pointing all of my records, my OAuth, my DNS records to Instantly, I can point it to my own server where Google and Microsoft aren't familiar with and they haven't already attributed that server to sending cold emails. Now, I think the future of cold email might see a lot more platforms like Email Bison that are trying to do this same thing, to really eliminate the fingerprints. And what they also do is they eliminate bad warm-up pools. So Instantly does a great job at keeping its warm-up pool pretty clean. If they detect that a mailbox is sending bad cold emails, corrupting the warm-up pool, they kick them out and they pause it. Email Bison's great because they only let your good cold email mailboxes inside of the platform. That way you're only interacting with really good mailboxes to do proper warm-up. And this is the number one thing to look out for if you're using something that's like a newer platform that's trying to be like Instantly or Smart Lead. Reach Inbox does a much better job at this now of keeping that warm-up pool clean. Because if you have a bad warm-up pool, that'll kill your entire mailbox infrastructure faster than you can say email. All right, next, here's something critical that has saved my personal mailboxes. And I think this is the main reason my Gmail accounts, my legacies, did not get banned. I keep my email volume under 20 emails per day per mailbox. All of my company mailboxes were in the same legacy panels that got hit, but none of mine were affected, and I'm convinced the answer is volume. In fact, most of my Gmail accounts that are on those legacy panels were sending about 10 per day per mailbox. That is like 3 or 4 times lower than the average. Now, unfortunately, I can't really control how many emails per day that my clients are sending. We do mailbox infrastructure. We load them into their Instantly. And we say, here you go. There's nothing I can do to prevent them from cranking up the volume, which is what eventually I think damages the mailbox and signals to Google and Microsoft that those mailboxes might be sending cold emails. So if you can afford to, I recommend keeping the volume as low as possible and scaling the number of mailboxes. I think volume is going to be a big factor going forward in eliminating those fingerprints and really increasing the percentage of good emails to spam emails. Because if you're doing proper warm-up, All of those warm-up emails are good emails, training the infrastructures that you're sending good emails. And if you're only sending 10, 15 cold emails per day, you've got a pretty good chance of having a good spam ratio. Which brings me to probably the most important factor of all, and maybe the hardest one to avoid, is people marking your emails as spam. If people are marking your emails as spam, nothing else matters. Google and Microsoft can see those spam complaints instantly and they will shut you down. Not just the mailbox, the domain, the IP address, every fingerprint that they can see attached to that domain, potentially even phrases that you're using in your cold email. Now, there's some really easy ways that you can avoid getting reported as spam. In fact, Instantly has some really great features for just that. You'll come into Instantly, Settings, you'll come into Advanced Deliverability, Unlikely to Reply, either send last or skip. Hostile prospects, skip them. Absolutely skip them. This is going to help you stay out of spam. Now, one of the huge benefits to using a platform like Instantly is they collect tons of data. They know the people that are responding, go F yourself, giving the middle finger, reporting as spam. They know who's hostile, they know who's angry, and those are likely the spam reporters. And we don't want to email those people. And also make sure to set up those block list triggers. If somebody wants to unsubscribe, they says remove me or tells you to go F yourself, make sure to add them to a block list immediately, because the fastest way to get reported as spam, emailing somebody who already said to stop. You definitely don't want to do that. And by the way, guys, as a secondary benefit, you might be saying, Jay, if I check all these boxes and I do all of these things, that I'm going to be cutting the number of people I'm emailing way down. Yeah, but you're also going to have a way better response rate, way better engagement rate, which is going to help you with your deliverability. The name of the game isn't to email as many people as possible or to spend the lowest amount on leads. It's to get the highest possible engagement rate. Another feature you're going to want to activate, let's go inside of campaigns, and you're going to come into options, and you're going to see a couple things that Instantly does for you to make life a lot easier to avoid spam traps and avoid bounces. And that's going to be in deliverability optimization. You're going to want to make sure to check both of these boxes if you can. Send email as text only. I really like this option too. Send first email as text only. That way in your second and third, if you want to share a YouTube link or a Loom link, you can, and it'll actually send that link. Now let's come into advanced options and come all the way down. You're gonna see a couple of things that they already do by default, and that is allowing risky emails. You wanna make sure that these are enabled. By enabled, I mean unchecked. Do not enable risky emails, and you do not disable bounce protect. They are using all of their collective data to make sure that you're not emailing spam traps and that your emails are not bouncing. And for those of you wondering what a spam trap is, there's a lot of different blacklist providers out there. So let's actually come to one of them. I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna go to MX Toolbox and we're gonna go to blacklist. Let's just see if leadgenj.com is on a blacklist. So they actually run my data through all of these different blacklists. Each of these blacklists, how they the main methodology that they use to put you on their list is by planting these little landmines, these spam traps out into the world. And the only way to find those emails and email them is through cold email. So if you hit one of their spam traps, you're likely to get added to one of these blacklists. And you should definitely come in and test your domain if you're having deliverability issues to see if you're on any of these. I've got a whole other video on how to see if you're on a blacklist and to get off of one. But make sure that you are paying attention to this. It's another great reason why 99% of you should stay on Instantly and don't try and do something like Email Bison. It's because you can crowdsource all of this data that they've already done for you that makes life so easy. Avoid the spam traps, avoid the bounces, avoid the hostile prospects. You can't do any of that with most other platforms. Now let's talk about what's changed. Here's what to do in 2026 to inbox, not just to Google, but inboxing everywhere. The words that you use in your emails matter more than ever. Google and Microsoft are scanning every single email that you're sending, and they're looking for marketing, sales, promotional language that's common to cold emailers. But here's the problem. It's not just enough anymore to remove obvious spam words like sale or guarantee anymore. We are now seeing entire phrases get flagged that don't show up on any spam checker. Why? Well, when thousands of cold emailers use the same phrase over and over, and they get reported as spam, the email service providers start associating that specific phrase with spam. And it can be something as innocent as your company name, like Otter Public Relations, or your business address that you're using in your signature. What you'll see is crazy. You'll see, all right, I'm sending the same email copy with my business address, and then the same email copy without my business address. One inboxes, one goes to spam. What's the difference? Wow, they're seeing that address and associating it with spam. This is a big change that's happened only in the last 6 months. And the only way to really know what phrase is causing it is to run inbox placement tests with different copy variations. I'm actually almost done building a tool that does exactly this. So you can create those different variations, test them, and see which one inboxes and which one doesn't. It's not live yet. Make sure to join my free school community. It's gonna be linked down below. As soon as it's live, they're gonna know first. They're gonna get free access to it. My lead gen school community has over 20,000 people, and it's the #1 community online for lead generation. Next important thing I wanna talk about is spin tax. Now, this is something that's been part of my training for years, and it's still a non-negotiable. And if you don't already know what spin tax is, this is a way that you write copy where it rotates through different variations of your copy. So just showing you what this looks like. When you see all of these brackets are spin tax. So all of these forms the first part of my sentence. So if I preview it, this is what the email actually looks like. This is what the spin tax version looks like. So it just rotates through all of these different phrases and ways to say the same thing. And the purpose of this is to basically prevent the email service providers from identifying the same patterns over and over again and associate it with spam. And the more spin tax that you use, the better. However, even the best spin tax has limitations. It is still limited to the hard-coded exact phrases that you have in that email. So even if you saw them, I have 7 variations of the same phrase there, it's still only 7 variations. And it's likely 4 of those variations could get blacklisted and start to go to spam. So what's the solution, if not spin tax? Well, what I'm seeing more and more that's becoming popular and working really well is AI-generated unique copy for each prospect. Now, Google and Microsoft can't identify a phrase as spam and block your email if every single email you send is completely original, or every phrase is completely original, because you don't need to do this for the entire email. Only the phrases that you suspect could get blacklisted. And this has never been easier to do at scale. So say you're suspicious that the address you're using is getting blacklisted. Well, what if instead of using your actual business address, you just used a unique address that's in that prospect city? That way, the prospect thinks that you live in the same place, which means you have instant rapport. You're substituting their city. You're making a real unique address using AI. And now that address is no longer going to spam. And you can do this across your entire email. Identify and pick out those phrases that Google can use that are kind of unique to you that other people probably aren't using a ton of, because they can't just ban all phrases. For example, on my screen, you'll see, we've just reserved, we've kept. I don't even think these are great phrases to use spin tax with, because they can't ban the phrase we've reserved or we've kept. It's just too specific. However, when you break down the entire thing, we've just reserved a feature story about company name. That is something that maybe they can ban the feature story about, with the we've kept the feature story about. So what you have to do is you have to identify and use your critical reasoning, your thinking hat on, to figure out, okay, these are the phrases that might be at risk. How can I use AI to generate unique variations of this for each prospect? And there's 2 really easy ways to do this at scale. The first is using a tool like Clay, which makes it really easy to do AI personalization, enrichment at scale. It does cost a few $100s per month, so if you don't want to pay that, you can actually do this for free using N8N. In fact, I've got templates for all of these things, especially when it comes to cold email and lead generation. So if you want to learn how to build these automations yourself, you want to make sure to join my AI Automation Insiders. This is my newest school community where I teach people how to build automations with N8N, how to use Claude Code to build software and to build really cool automations just using AI. It'll actually design the automations inside of N8N. So make sure to hop in here too. There is a free version where you can get access to most things. All right, now for the part that you've probably been waiting for this entire time. What infrastructure is actually working right now? Because all those other variables that I just talked about, you're probably already doing if you've been following this channel for a long time. Hopefully you're doing those right. Nothing's changed, and now you're seeing a drop in deliverability. Here's the real answer. Here's the quick way to fix it. When this first happened several months ago, we did a really fast shift. We went from almost 100% Google mailboxes to mostly Google with a bunch of SMTP, and we tried a lot of different providers, Mail-in, Maildoso. We tried Inframail, we tried Mission Inbox, and we tried Microsoft mailboxes. We're primarily using inboxing.com. That's actually why I built the Inbox Insiders. I wanted to make it really easy for people to diversify their infrastructure, just to come in here and to be able to place an order and choose what type of mailbox that they wanted from the best, most trusted providers. I don't make any of these SMTP mailboxes. I only use Mission Inbox here, and I bring it to you pretty much at cost. If you were to do this through them, it would cost almost double this. So you can come in here and you can diversify your infrastructure, which is super important. But what we found over the past several months is people are having a really hard time inboxing to Google. But who wasn't having a very hard time was people using Google mailboxes. Now that has already started to change. In fact, me and all of my clients who are using Mission Inbox SMTP mailboxes are still inboxing really well to Google, but mostly because we send really good cold emails. But overall, we've definitely found that Google right now has the highest deliverability to Google. But there's a few big changes to how we're using and setting up those Google mailboxes. We've gone away from the legacy panels. And for those of you who have not heard about these, I did a whole video about them. We used to buy these grandfathered Google accounts where we can set up hundreds of Google Suite mailboxes on them. They would cost several $1,000s to buy, but then we didn't have any monthly subscriptions. Well, in November, they all got banned. Not all of them, but a lot of them. If you're interested in buying one of those, you can shoot me an email. I still have a bunch of them that I can sell, but the risk is going to be on you. But now for our services, we are no longer using those. We are now using entirely Google reseller mailboxes. These are official Google mailboxes that we pay monthly for, pass you on a little bit of the cost. They're much safer than legacy panels, and the deliverability is excellent. And if you are interested in the legacy method, we have pretty much stopped seeing these getting banned. All of the ones that we're currently running seem to be safe. It was just that one wave of bans, but there might be another wave. So if you're interested, we still have thousands of mailboxes on these things, and it is still one of the greatest God's gift to earth that we don't have to pay monthly for these Google mailboxes. So make sure you're part of my insiders community if you want to buy one of these. I don't just sell them to the general public, but we do have some to sell. So let's talk about the different infrastructures and what's working. We are preferring Google, and we're moving a lot of our high ticket clients back over to Google mailboxes from Mission Inbox. Mission Inbox performs great, but Google performs just as good for about half the price. So right now, I am encouraging most people to use Google mailboxes. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Google's already shown some obvious hostility towards cold email. So could they theoretically shut down these Google reseller mailboxes or suspend your domains or mailboxes for cold emailing? You betcha. You absolutely betcha. But you know which ones are going to be safe no matter what? Mission Inbox mailboxes, SMTP, because they're not owned by any of the big infra providers like Google or Microsoft, and they keep their IP addresses really clean. So when we think about these SMTP mailboxes and deliverability, I always like comparing it to like a MailChimp or an ActiveCampaign. Now those platforms, excellent deliverability. If you sign up for MailChimp, chances are you're going to get into your prospect's mailbox. The reason for it, they've got really good IP addresses, and they keep those IP addresses really clean. The email service providers know that those IPs, belong to trustworthy companies, and their customers hopefully send good cold emails that don't get reported as spam. And if you try and sign up for one of those platforms like MailChimp and send cold emails, you'll probably get through a batch of 500 before MailChimp kicks you off. The reason for it, people are going to report it as spam, and they don't tolerate that BS. You're out of there. With platforms like Mission Inbox, it's pretty much the same thing. They're in charge of keeping their IP addresses clean so that they work, which is why sometimes they can be expensive, but as a long-term solution, could be a really good one. Microsoft, kind of the same thing. So Microsoft uses a workaround. So you'll see if you order from our services, Microsoft is $30 for 49 mailboxes, but those mailboxes only send about 5 emails per day per mailbox. The guy who explained it to me, it's so interesting. I don't want to try and explain it because I'm probably going to butcher it. I don't know how to set these up, nor do I want to be in charge of it. I just use really good people that do. So if you want to use these, you can buy them through us, $30 for 49 mailboxes, but it's also through a workaround similar to the Google legacy panels. So at any time, Microsoft can say, oh, look at all these people exploiting that loophole. Let's shut it down. And the same thing could happen to you that happened to Google. So we just have to keep this in mind going forward. No infrastructure is perfectly safe except maybe SMTP. So let me just go over the fundamentals, what you should be doing, what my recommendation is now, and then I want to leave you with a thought experiment. This is something I'm working on going forward, just in case shit really hits the fan and we have to do the worst case scenario. to send our cold emails. I have a plan for it. I want to share it with you. So let's talk about some of the things that are non-negotiables, the recommendations. Tracking codes off. No unsubscribe links. Don't say opt out by saying the word this. It makes it sound like a cold email, not like an email from a friend. And that's the copywriting part. We'll talk about that in another video. No tracking. No link clicks, no open tracking, no unsubscribe links. Plain text only. But if somebody opts out, make sure that you have that AI automatically pulling them out, putting them onto a blacklist. Make sure you're using Instantly's data to avoid bounces, to avoid sending to hostile prospects, to avoid spam traps. Make sure you're using spin tax. Overuse spin tax. Go nuts on spin tax. At the bare minimum, go nuts on spin tax. If you really want to get fun, use AI to write fully customized phrases or even full cold emails for your prospects. In terms of infrastructure, Google is performing the best right now. No way around it. But to future-proof yourself, make sure that you've got some Microsoft, make sure that you've got some SMTP in there. But we're leaning heavily into Google at this point. Now let's talk about really future-proofing, because we talked about all these fingerprints. If Google wanted to shut cold email down for any emails using OAuth, using that as a fingerprint, looking at the naming conventions. Oh, wow, look, all of J.Feldman, J at otterpr.com. They all have the same headshot. There's all of these fingerprints that exist. However, we wanted to really avoid all of those detections. The one thing that I'm thinking is gonna work really, really well is browser automated email. So one thing that is tried and true, that remains to be true every time that I do it, when I do a deliverability test from the same mailbox from Instantly using OAuth, and then send the same copy from the actual Gmail app, every single time from the Gmail app, it goes to the inbox. Because it's not using that OAuth connection, it's using the native Gmail infrastructure. However, automating that is very difficult, especially at scale, especially as a service. I can't have 1,000 clients logging in doing browser automation, and it's hard to do it with a lot of mailboxes. So, future-proof for myself, I am building myself a tool to be able to load all of my different Gmail browsers and then do browser automation to send through the browsers to my destination. There's almost no fingerprints left using that technology other than maybe IP address tracking, which can also easily be manipulated through rotating residential IPs. Whole different conversation for another day. But that is the current advice for email deliverability for getting through to Google. And if you saw my Instantly screen from earlier, we are now inboxing almost 100% again to Google. This is the last 7 days. Google to Google, 94. Google to Microsoft, 99. Google to other, 94. And I think this workspace only has the Googles. But you'll see that it works. Google is working, inboxing's working, and cold email world is back to normal. All things are well. Until the next cold email apocalypse, which I'm sure is coming sooner than we would like, but remember, it won't be the last. And I will be here to guide you through it. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you like this video so you see more important updates like it, and drop some comments. Let me know how you're faring after these new updates. Let me know if you have any constructive advice that you think would be helpful for our audience. And hopefully I'll see you in my free school community. A link down below. See you soon.